Hello and welcome back to the Royal Roundup. It has been a bombshell week is probably the best way to describe it. Whether you are in the US or the UK, you will be across that infamous Netflix series that we've been speaking about a fair bit on the Royal Roundup in the run-up to it. What did it involve? Well, now we know there are 3 more episodes to go, but we'll be debunking everything about it today, from the royal family reaction to it to perhaps parts of it which we didn't expect, such as that Diana interview being mentioned. We are, of course, joined by Daily Express's royal correspondent, Richard Palmer. Richard, thank you for coming on.
Hi.
It's been a very, very busy week for you. Where to start? Obviously, there's been lots of reaction to the series. I'm guessing you've watched it?
I have. I have to confess, I've not seen every bit of the. Some of them, we like a lot of papers. We divided up the 3 episodes yesterday so that we could more quickly get to the root of what was in each of them. So I was particularly focused on the 3rd episode because I'd understood that it got more controversial as it went on, and I suppose overall my view is that it didn't contain the sort of bombshell new allegations about individual members of the royal family that some might have expected or feared, but it was still a pretty damaging and quite dramatic attack on the legacy of the Queen. Really, I think is the the overall view that it was particularly, although they have made great play as a couple of saying, oh, how much they love Granny or loved Granny and respected her, they've attacked everything she stood for, really. And I think that's shocked people inside the royal household and the family. And I think the thing that has, there were various things. There were various things that caught the eye yesterday. You mentioned the use of the Panorama interview, which William has sort of set out and said he doesn't think that should be shown again. So that was interesting. And then something that I think caused a lot of controversy online was the footage of Meghan describing her first meeting with the Queen and doing a very, very exaggerated curtsy and mocking all of that. I mean, we can come back to that if you like, but I do think that underlining it all, the thing that is the most wounding for the royal family, for the royal household, and possibly for the UK government, is the way they use that documentary series to attack the Commonwealth and the monarchy's role in it.
Richard, before you go on, I'm going to have to ask, as I know we've had a couple of technical difficulties, you can lift your phone slightly because the vibration of the sound is going onto your laptop. Even though we can hear you, there's a slight crackling noise. So I'm afraid you're going to have to hold it up slightly.
I have to hold it, yeah. We've had a few technical issues.
It's a little bit crackly, but whilst I kind of go over the topics that we're going to sort today, we'll get Sam, the producer, just to work with you for a second to try and get your sound okay. So in terms of the topics today, we will be talking about, obviously, as Richard said there, the reaction from the royal family themselves and just how damaging this was. But we do want to hear your opinions on this. Do you think that Harry and Meghan, have a right to tell their story? That's what they said. It's coming from them, and that's why you guys should listen to it. Are you interested in it? I know lots of people would rather not watch it, actually, and there are bigger stories going on in the world right now than that. So whilst Richard leaves, you'll be with me for a couple of minutes. So Richard, if you want to pop off and then click on the link again to come back in, that'd be fantastic. And then obviously we will be talking about that poll that we put up for you guys in terms of if you're watching, and if so, what are your thoughts on it? We've got 3 polls going live at the moment, so if you hand over to the Daily Express Twitter, you'll be able to vote on those and have a look. But we want to hear your comments. And the interesting thing about the series, the docu-series, which is co-produced by both Harry and Meghan, so it is a little bit biased, it has to be said, but it is a docu-series, is the way that they would like to describe it, is the Diana interview, the disgraced Diana interview from Panorama. Now, Prince William, the now Prince of Wales, obviously Harry's brother, completely slammed this interview and would rather no footage from it be used again. This is obviously, as journalists, we're very much well aware of this, and we make an effort not to do so. However, that interview was mentioned within the Netflix series, so we'll also be talking about that. But hopefully we'll be joined back by Richard now. Richard, have we got your sound working?
Well, I hope so.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. No. Okay. Great. Okay. Good. Hopefully it doesn't crackle anymore. But we did hear the first part of that. But we'll dive right in to the first topic then. So the general reaction to the show, it's obviously been all across the world now after the premiere. Lots of people are debunking bits about it. You focused on the 3rd episode. In terms of reaction from the close family themselves, as you're quite literally on the front line covering their events, are they very much not complaining and not explaining?
At the moment, I had a story on the front of the Sunday Express at the weekend from Boston, where I was reporting that my understanding was that Prince William in particular was ready to speak out if there were material inaccuracies or things in the programs that he felt was really unfair. And my understanding was the King and Queen Consort were sort of ready to make some sort of statement if necessary. At the moment, they don't believe that is, or that they're sort of taking a pause. I mean, they're not speaking on the record for the moment, but of course, but they've, that doesn't mean they've ruled it out at all. We saw when Harry and Meghan did the opera interview that took a little bit of time before responding. I think the feeling is at the moment there isn't the material in there that requires them to respond publicly, but we'll have to wait and see. And of course, there are 3 more episodes to go.
There are, and obviously Prince Harry's book as well is coming out in January. So, do you think perhaps the tactic is to wait until January to make any big moves?
Well, yeah, they're just reserving their position. What we did have yesterday was a bit of backwards and forwards over whether the royal family was given the right of reply for this documentary, because there was a notice at the start of the first one saying that the royal family had been contacted and had not responded, and been given the right to reply but hadn't responded. Well, Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace actually said, well, initially they said we weren't contacted, so we don't know anything about this, we weren't contacted. And then later both said, well, there was an email from somebody whose email address we didn't recognize. It's sort of a third-party organisation. We tried to check with Archwell, that's Harry and Meghan's organisation, and with the makers Netflix, whether this was a bona fide person, and we heard nothing about that. So we heard nothing back, so they didn't pursue it. So
there seems to be a bit of mixed messaging then, very much showing a divide again, it seems, even from a household perspective.
Well, yeah, and of course, there's always a briefing war of these things. So although the household says we're not commenting, you know, inevitably journalists like me speak, know people, we speak to people privately, and
Yeah.
and there is, up to a point, a desire on the part of people close to the royal family to get their point across. So there's a little bit of that, but so you'll see quotes in our paper and in other papers this morning from sources, and obviously I'm not going to say they are, but friends of the royal family and others do, were speaking yesterday, and they were shocked at some of the content. I can see Johanna Claire McMenemy saying there was nothing against the royal family. I don't know where you from, Johanna, because Harry accused the royal family of racism. Effectively, he accused them of unconscious bias, and he did say often unconscious bias isn't anybody's fault, but you just need to deal with it. There was a lot of material in that programme that raised a lot of eyebrows. So.
And do you think that the king will be particularly hurt about this? Because obviously we led on the Daily Express front page, with a picture of him on this, so hurtful, royals deeply upset by Harry's slurs. Do you think that, we saw yesterday when he was there, he didn't comment on this, but behind the scenes, obviously royal sources are saying that it is hurtful. Do you think he will be genuinely hurt by this?
Yeah, I think so, and certainly before it was aired at the weekend, we were hearing that the King and the Queen Consort were both wearied by Harry and Meghan's sort of constant complaining about the life they led, and I think there's a lot of unhappiness about them undermining.
Yeah.
Because they gave an undertaking that they would uphold the values of the Queen. They would. We were told that the 7 principles of public life, the Nolan principles, were reference point for them, and that talks about selflessness, integrity, standing up for the public interest, and some people pointed out, for example, that as an army officer, Harry swore an oath to be loyal to the Queen and all of her descendants, and it's been alleged that he's broken a lot of those pledges, really.
Yeah. And just whilst we go on to the next topic and go through a couple of polls, Richard, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to click out of the StreamYard and click back into it because you're crackling again. And we're getting a couple of comments about it. So if you don't mind, you'll be back in a couple of minutes. So whilst we get Richard back, do keep those comments coming, and he will respond to them as and when. But let's get up a couple of polls now, as you guys did vote on these subjects, and we want to hear whether you have been watching it. Have you watched Meghan and Harry's Netflix documentary yet? No, 80%. Yes, 19%. So that's the Daily Express audience. But on site and on social, it's the only things that you guys are talking about. So I guess my question to you, viewers and readers who are watching, if you haven't watched it, then how can you make a roundabout decision about it? Or is it a point of principle that you feel like you don't need to watch it? Let's have a look at the next poll then. Richard, welcome back.
Thanks. Is that any better?
Yeah, that's better. That's better. I was just going through the polls. So do you think that King should react to the Netflix documentary? Quite split on this one, Richard. We've got 48% saying yes and 51% saying no. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's a difficult call for all of them, I think, because they're always worried that anything they say just feeds the story. And I think we see this on social media. If you try to respond to somebody who's leveling all sorts of abuse at you, it's very hard to actually, even though you try to justify what you've done and explain, people just, it just goes on and on. People just abuse you even more. So that's my experience on social media. And I suppose the same argument is also relevant for the royal family. So we'll have to wait and see. I think they probably will want to set their record straight at some point, but it'll in a very measured way, probably.
Yeah. Fiona says, so there was nothing controversial in these first 3 episodes, just the story from the victims, Harry and Meghan. It rang totally true about the tabloids whipping up controversy so they can sell their papers. The papers are mean, arrogant, and indecent. Right. So from a journalist point of view, Richard, what would you say back to Fiona? Because they have very much created this narrative within the first 3 episodes, and it was very damning against the press.
Yes, well, it's been their constant refrain, and it's I mean, clearly. Oh, sorry, my phone fell down. We're not having a very good day here, are we? Clearly, they've suffered negative press. They've been criticised, but so do many other people in the public eye. And I did want to tackle this really because I think they have. First of all, they created a false narrative to say that the press was out to get them and was just going to destroy them. It's just not true. I mean, and at the end of the day, my view is, having dealt with them up to a point, although Meghan never really had much to do with us, and having covered the royal family for 18 years,
Yeah.
Everything I've seen and heard suggests to me that these are a couple of people who are really damaged by their upbringing, by their childhoods. Both coming from broken homes, for want of a better phrase, and they clearly are very much in love. They've found their soulmates, and I think they feed off one another and they feed off each other's paranoia and prejudices sometimes, but the fact is the press has just been doing its job, and it's part of the role of the media to question, to scrutinize people in public life, and they were in public life. They were representing our head of state. They were part of the family of the head of state. And so just as a US or French president faces questions about their behavior, so do members of the royal family. Where it is slightly different, I guess, is that a US president, an elected head of state, is there it's just them, and then the family. Well, you have a first lady or a first husband in some countries, who is sort of on the scene, but is not really quite the same. But we have a family. This is how they sell it to us. They tell us that Prince William, Prince George, and also other members of the family are somehow more special than our children, our grandchildren, because they are going to be heads of state in the future. So inevitably, there is a lot of public interest and a lot of media interest, both domestically in the UK and internationally, in the family, because they are in a different position than all other families, and so they should expect more public interest and more scrutiny. It's very difficult for them. You have to sympathise with them. We've said before, you wouldn't want to live in a goldfish bowl like they do. They don't face the same pressures that, say, Diana faced and previous generations of the royal family, because press regulation has changed in the wake of Diana's death, and I think they make some very unfair and unjustified claims, and indeed so do many other journalists covering this beat. Nick Witchell, the BBC's royal correspondent, was on the 10 o'clock news last night saying that a lot of their claims about the media didn't stand up to scrutiny, and I agree with him.
Yeah. The last little 2 words of that, Richard, went a bit crackly. So whilst you've answered that question, we'll ask one more time for you to come in, and then then if it's still crackly, then we will come to the end of the Raw Roundup today. But we'll ask one more time for you to come in, and then if it's still crackly, then we will reorganize this. But I did get most of what you just said then, so don't worry. And that was a great response. But we're gonna move on now into another subject, and that is the fact that we put a poll out saying, has the royal family let Harry and Meghan down? Because obviously with anything with Harry and Meghan, it does seem to divide people. They did speak about the royal family and their role as a business or a firm within the series. So we did ask that, do you think? And 6% said yes, but this poll did get thousands of votes. So that's a good few hundred people. So what we wanted to do on the Royal Roundup today was to debunk this. Richard, welcome back. We're just going to go over, do you think the royal family have let Harry and Meghan down? And you did quite briefly speak about that in terms of the press reaction and how supposedly we may have let them down. But from a royal family's perspective, actually, before that, we'll go to Paul's comment. The media and journalists in particular hounded Princess Diana. So Harry's protective reactions are warranted. And you did refer to that in terms of his childhood, Richard.
Yes, but claims have been made that they've been hounded, and it's just not true in my experience. Certainly not in the UK. I mean, it's possible in the US that they've faced more press harassment, and of course we saw in that in the trailers for the documentary series some really misleading images used of US press covering Donald Trump's lawyer heading off to report to prison, for example. Nothing to do with the royal family. A film premiere from 2011, Harry Potter premiere, again, nothing, years before Harry and Meghan even met. So I mean, and that's an interesting question as well, because in the UK we have rules about broadcasting which are most importantly used for news programs, but also for other types of television programs, which, where they're dealing with controversial issues, they're supposed to be balanced, and they're supposed to give this right of reply. Netflix is not currently regulated by the US media regulator Ofcom. It's regulated by the Dutch media regulator, which appears to be completely toothless. It's never yet investigated Netflix, as far as I can tell, and doesn't really get involved in judging whether programs were balanced and gave a right of reply. So
that's a very interesting point. That's a very interesting
The British
point.
government published a white paper earlier this year setting out plans to bring streaming services, including Netflix, under the control of Ofcom. So I think that will change. I mean, I just think just really unfair criticism of the media. Of course, whatever type of journalism you work in, you are going to write stuff that is negative about people at times. Sometimes negative, sometimes positive, sometimes what would be deemed neutral. And journalists, whatever they cover, whether it's sport or pastimes like chess or politics or whatever, they are always accused of being too hard on people or too soft on people. And certainly as a royal correspondent, I get accused of both, and by all sides as well. And I think what I was going to say about Harry and Meghan is that not only are they two damaged people, perhaps because of the damage they've experienced, they are extremely difficult people to deal with, and just really not pleasant people to deal with or to work for, from what we've been told. And you only have to look at the allegations of bullying that were made and the gagging clauses that have been placed by the palace on the people who made those allegations, and the rapid turnover of staff that they've experienced at Archewell, to see that there's some evidence that they aren't the easiest of people to work for.
Yeah, that is something that does get overlooked. And in terms of the royal family's treatment towards them, they've obviously gone into detail in this 3 episodes so far, about the fact that when Meghan came in, it's sort of like, she has to go through a certain process, as it were, the same as when any woman does come in to the royal family. And then Harry mentioned the fact, well, what's different is the race element. So speaking about the royal family's treatment then of Meghan and Harry, Richard, from a royal correspondent's point of view, what can you say about that? That perhaps people don't realise when they watch this documentary.
Well, I think the race allegations are racism allegations are clearly explosive. And as we discussed, I think last week, the comments made by Lady Susan Hussey, etc., certainly added to Harry and Meghan's case on that. But again, I don't think Lady Susan Hussey is a racist by any measure. But he talked about unconscious bias, and certainly that has to be an issue. But again, the king and his family have spent an awful lot of time in the last few years working on racial awareness, tolerance, multiculturalism, supporting all of those things. And from everything I know about it, it's really quite unfair to imply that there is racism inside the royal family.
Okay, yeah, well, that's an interesting point that Harry did make there. But Richard, due to the technical issues which have been happening today, I think what's best now, I mean, we're nearly out of time anyway, is we reconvene at another point to go over a couple of subjects that we might have missed. There is so much to go over in this Netflix documentary today. As you can tell, Richard's on the road doing his job, so he's very much had to come on here, so he's not in his normal place. Hence the technical difficulties, but it is what it is. We did get a fair few minutes with Richard today in his tight, busy schedule. So thank you, Richard, for coming on. And we will rearrange at a further point. But unfortunately, we've had to pull it early today with the technical issues. But you can catch all of the Raw Roundup over on our Twitter. And we can go over lots more of the topics, and of course there'll be lots more to discuss next week. So we'll be back with a date and a time very soon. Thank you.